Hey everyone, welcome to part 2 of my Facebook Android tutorial series. Where here I'm going to show you how to create login functionality and using the Graph API in your application. So I'll just give you a demo of what it looks like first. So if I run this, you can see we have the button to continue with Facebook. After I press it, you'll be prompted to log in. After you've logged in, your profile picture will load and your name will be displayed. Then afterwards, after you've logged out, you can see everything disappears. This is what we'll be building. To get this started, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a new Android Studio project. So I'm just going to click New Project. I'm just going to use an empty activity. And then I'm just going to give it a name. I'll just name it Facebook Login. The only thing then that you need to make sure is down here for minimum SDK, you may have to make sure that you are using API 15 or Android 4.0.3, which is Ice Cream Sandwich, or higher if you want to create the project with this Facebook login. Next, I'll click Finish. Now it is loaded. So now we've got our project up and running. Let's go into Google and we have to go to Facebook for Developers. Now that we're here, just log in. Now that you're logged in, go to My Apps. Then we're going to add a new app. Choose for everything else. I'm going to do Login App. So now that our app's been created, we're going to go down here to Facebook Login and click Setup. We're doing Android because we're using Android Studio. And then we're going to follow these steps. And so I've divided my screen now for Facebook for Developers on the right and Android Studio on the left to make things easier. Now the first step isn't exactly necessary, so you can download the Android SDK. And so the Facebook SDK, what it basically is it helps you build social apps with Facebook functionality. And there are 6 different component SDKs. So I'll download it and I'll show you what it looks like on the inside. So now I'll go to my downloads. You can see I have Facebook right here. Click through all these. And so once you get here, these are all the SDKs. You can see you have login, you have core, and what they are is they are AAR files, or they are Android archive files. You can see in here. So if you want to add this locally, what you would do is you would just go into File in your Android project, then you go to Project Structure, and you go to Modules, and you add a module. And then you would go down here to import a jar or an AAR package. And then you would import. You would go into here, then you would go to where you downloaded the Facebook SDK, and you would click on the AAR file and import it. But we're not going to be doing that. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be using Maven. And a reason you would download the Facebook SDK instead of using Maven is you can choose selectively which of the Facebook SDKs you want to download and save space. For example, if you just want to use login, you don't have to include all of them. But so we're just going to click Next here. And down here you can see this is why I told you to create a project that is greater than API 15. And you can see here is now we're going to be using Maven Central. And so what Maven is it basically just contains a large number of libraries that we can use. And you can actually go online and you can find these libraries. So let me show you that real quick. So I've opened up Google and I'm just going to type in Maven Central. And now once it's loaded, it's this link here. And you can actually look for the SDKs. So what we're looking for is here, com.facebook.android.sdk. So what you can do now is you type in com.facebook.android, which is the group ID, and you can see we have down here Facebook Android SDK. That's the artifact ID. And now you can see all the versions. And so the version, as you can see here, we have 5.6, which basically means 5.0.0 and onwards to 6, but not including 6. And so in Android, you have 2 Gradle files. You have build.gradle for the project, and you also have build.gradle for your module. For adding the Maven Central repository, we're going to be clicking on this first one, the project Gradle. And now under repositories, you're going to be adding Maven Central. After you've added Maven Central here, what you need to do is you need to sync the project. And so Maven Central here is an alias for the dependencies that are fetched from that repository that I just showed you right here. The next thing we need to do is you need to open up your build.gradle file for your module. And you're going to come down here, you're going to copy and paste implementation right here. And then you'll paste it under dependencies, just like that. And then once again, you'll have to sync. Now if it's yellow, highlighted yellow like this, hover over and see to the newer version, and click that, update it, and then sync again. And so you can see the newer version that we're using is 5.15.3. And so this is taken from Maven Central here, the repository. And so I can show you what I was just showing is over here you can see 5.15.3. So this is the version that is being taken from this repository. Now I'm going to be going down here and I'm going to be copying this code so I can import the Facebook SDK packages into my project. So I'm going to click copy code, go to main activity here, click on this for import, and paste them in. And you can see they're gray because they haven't been used yet, but they're not red because they have been imported. Now I'm going to go down here and click next to step 3. Something that we have to provide Facebook is the package name of our project. And so you can get that from the manifest file here, manifest XML, and you can see package is listed right here. So just copy this and paste it in here. Next, you need the default activity class name. So that's basically the package name again, and then main activity. Notice how these are packages because these are lowercase, so comma is a package, example is a package, Facebook login is a package, and then main activity starts with a capital, that's the class. And then click save. You will get this message here to make sure to asking you basically if your app is listed publicly on Google Play Store, and it is not, so we're just going to tell them to use this package name. Now that we've saved, you can click continue. Now, when using Facebook APIs, something you need to supply Facebook with is a key hash. And basically the key hash is used to ensure authenticity with your app and Facebook. There are 2 types of key hashes. There's a development key hash and there's a release key hash. What this basically means is you need a key hash for developing your app and one for releasing your app to the Google Play Store. It should also be noted that obtaining this key hash is different for macOS and Windows. I'm going to be showing you how to do it on the Windows operating system. And so to run this and generate this key hash, one of the first things you need to do is you have to use the key tool from Java. And this comes with the SDK downloaded, so it's not something that you usually have to download. Something to do this that you will need a tool is the key tool, and this comes already installed with Java. So if you've downloaded the Java SDK, and specifically if you have Java added to your path variable, then you won't actually have to specify the location of this executable, as key tool is an executable program that you use. I will show you where it is located. So you just go to where you have Java downloaded. And so for me, the default installation and the default installation place for everyone is in program files. So you can see Java here, and then these are all the JDKs that I have. So I'm going to click on JDK 8 right here, and then you go to bin, or your binary folder, and you can see the key tool alphabetically is right here, keytool.exe. If you don't have Java added to your path variable, what you should do is you should paste in this location into your command line, and then -keytool like this. Note, however, that if you have any spaces, it won't be recognized as a command. So what you should do is you should add quotations and then -keytool. But because I have Java installed in the path variable, I can just type in keytool like this, and you can see it can run. So now open up a Windows terminal, copy this code here, and just paste it in. And so you can see here that we're using the key tool command. And we also have these here, which are called pipes in Windows. And basically what it means is the output from here will be the input here. And then the output from here will be the input from here. And so I'll just run through the basics of this command line real quick. And so what Java key tool does is it allows us to manage our own public and private key pairs and certificates and then stores them in a Java key store. What a Java key store is basically just a database that contains keys. So you can see we're using key tool. What we're doing, export cert, means we're exporting a certification. The alias is the name of the key store that we want to create. So we want to create Android debug key. And the key store argument is used to specify the name of the key store file that you want to install this file in. So you can see we have users, your username, .android, and then debug key store is where we're going to be storing this key. The next command that we are using is going to be Openssl. And one of the functions of Openssl is to work as a cryptography library. And so to actually use Openssl, unlike key tool, this doesn't come pre-installed with the Java SDK. So what we'll have to do is we'll have to download it here on this link. So click on this link here, and then just click on the 64-bit version, one of here, and download the zip file. Now it's been downloaded, click on it. Now something you should make sure that you do is you have to unzip this file. So go back and right click and extract all in the desired location. For me, I'm just going to keep it in downloads. Now click into the extracted folder, go into bin for binary, and then you can see you have openssl.exe here. So this is the executable we want to use their cryptographic library functions. And so just copy and paste the path, and then you can see here you have path to openssl library, bin, and openssl. And so that is the path that we were using. So you can delete this part and type that in, and this is the path to it. Now do the same over here. Now the final thing we need to change is you need to make sure username here is the username you are using for where your Android folder is located. So for me, it's users and witto. So I can show you here. Here's my C drive. I have users, witto, and .android is here. So you need to make sure that you are using the user where this folder is located. So type that in here. And now I'll just do a quick overview of these arguments. So we're using Openssl, so we can use its cryptographic library functions. We have SHA1, which is secure hash algorithm 1, which basically says use the SHA1 message digest algorithm. And then we have dash binary, which makes the output in binary form. Then this will be passed over here, and we're going to be using base64, which is a cipher command, and is a way to encode binary data into the ASCII character set. And so now you're just going to press enter, and it'll ask for a password, and the default password is just Android. Now you can see that you have your key hash here. So what you're going to want to do is you're just going to want to copy it. Now go back to Facebook for Developers, use key hashes, and just paste it in here. Then click Save. And so as of now, we're not going to be using a release key hash because we are not going to be uploading our app to the store. However, in future videos, when I'm going to be uploading an app to the store, that is when we will be making a release key hash, and we will add it down here as well. And now we're just going to move on to part 5. So click Continue. And now we want to enable single sign-on for your app, which we want to do. So basically it means if someone is signed in to Facebook, then they can continuously log in without having to sign in over and over again. So switch this to yes, then click Save. And now go into part 6. And so now on part 6, one of the first things you see is talking about Chrome custom tabs. What they basically are is they allow developers to pre-start Chrome and pre-fetch content for a faster loading, so you don't have to use things like web views in your app. However, if you're using 5.15 or later, as it says here for Android, you don't actually need to add the activity or intent filter for these Chrome tabs, which you can see are down here. So you can see you have custom tab activity for the Chrome tabs. The way to check what version you are using is, once again, remember you should go to your module app right here, your build.gradle, and check the version. So you can see we are using 5.15.3, so we don't have to include those. But what we do have to include are right here. We need to place these in our strings.xml file. So copy this code, go into your resources, and then go under values, double click on strings.xml, and then paste these in here. And so you can see this is your Facebook app ID 314, which is used. You can also see it up here. This is what is used to identify your app. And then you have the login protocol scheme, which is just Facebook, and then your app ID once again. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to open the manifest file. And so that is located under here in manifests and Android manifest.xml. Double click on this. And now you need to add the permission for internet. So copy the code here, and you want to paste it after the application element. So this is the application element here in the XML file. Paste it in here. And just out of curiosity, if you're wondering why we use users permissions, it's basically if a requested permission is dangerous, the user will basically have to agree to using that app permission upon when they're using your app. And now lastly, we're going to add a metadata element and also an activity, which is the Facebook activity where the logging in and all that will be occurring. So we will need to paste this also. So now what you need to do is just copy the code from in here, make sure you're inside this application element, and paste it in. And as I stated earlier, because we are using, you can see in this Gradle file here, 5.15.3, we don't need the custom app activity, so we can just delete these. So now let's go to part 7, which is log app events. So app events are basically either one of 14 predefined events, such as adding to a cart in a commerce app, or you can even create your own custom event. In this application, we're not going to be using any events. We're just going to be creating a simple app login. So just click Next. Now is when we're starting to actually start programming. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add a login button. So copy the code here and place it into your layout file, which will be under Resources, Layout, Activity Main. Now you will go up here to Code, where you can see the XML. I'm going to delete this text view, and I'm going to paste in the button. You can see it's red just because we're using a constraint layout, and I haven't added any constraints yet, but everything is imported properly. So let me just add some constraints real quick. And now you can see what the actual button looks like if you go to your layout. This is the button here. Now, a quick overview of the login button. So as it says here, the login button wraps the functionality of the login manager. And what you can do with the login manager is you can log out, you can set permissions. So the permissions could be, you can retrieve a user's email, a user's profile picture, their ID, things like this. So this is all done through the login manager, but the functionality of that is wrapped into the login button. So if you're using a login button, you don't technically need a login manager. So now let's head on over to part 9. So the first thing we should do in step 9 is create a callback manager. And so I'm just going to copy this code here. I'm going to go to main activity, and then on create, I'll paste it in here. And so let me import it, and I'll declare the variable up here as a global variable. And now, the next thing that I'm going to be doing is I'm also going to be linking the login button. And it should be noticed that if, for example, you don't have login button showing up like this, that is because you need to build your project first. And so what you should just do is just run it. So if you run your project, then you will get login button will appear. But so it's appearing for me, so I'm going to do login button. I'm just going to set it there. Now I'm going to link it to our view. So if I go to the activity main.xml and I see the ID is login button. So I'll do login button equals find view by ID r.id.login button. So now that we've linked our login button and our callback manager, what we need to do is we need to set our permissions for our login. So logging in with Facebook is one thing, but what you want to do is log in with specific permissions. By default, you have permissions such as getting your name, ID, first name, and last name, but there are other permissions you want as well, such as email or gender. So you can see over here that when it talks about set permissions, it has login button.set read permissions. However, this method is now deprecated, and what you should actually use is set permissions. And so to find what these permissions are, what you should do is you should go into Facebook, and here in your app review, you would click on it and you would go to permissions. So I already have it loaded up here, and you can see permissions and features. And so you can go down here, and these are the permissions that you would specify in this function. So what I would do to set these permissions is I would use login button.set permissions, and it takes a list of strings. So I'd do array.asList, and let's see what we can have here. So we could do user gender. So if I do in user gender, another one we could use could be, let's say, user friends. So now when you log in, you will not only have the default permissions, which are like the name, ID, but now you can also use user gender and user friends. And furthermore, the reason we can actually set these permissions on the login button is because the login button class wraps the login manager class. And so when this login button is clicked, the login is initiated with the permissions that are set in the login manager, because the login button wraps the login manager class. The next thing we need to do is register a callback with this login button. So to respond to a login result, you need to register a callback with either the login manager or the login button. And so we're going to be doing it with the login button, because if you do that, you don't need to register it with the login manager. And so to make a callback, what we're going to do is we're going to do login button.register callback. And you can see it takes a callback manager, which is what we made up here with the callback manager factory create, and it takes Facebook callback manager for login result. And so the Facebook callback here is the login callback that will be called upon login completion. And this whole thing here isn't actually needed to log in, but it is a way to monitor the process. So for example, if the login was successful, what the code would be executed in here that you write in. If the login was canceled, this is where the code you would handle the canceling of the login. And here, if there was an error occurred, this is where you would handle the error. And the good thing about the success here is the login result contains parameters such as the access token and also the granted and declined permissions that you set up here. And so all I'm going to do is I will just do log.d. I'm going to just name it demo. I'm just going to say login successful. And then I'm going to do the same thing with cancel and on error. So now you can see we've done this. We've registered a callback, even though this isn't completely necessary. And then the next step that we need to do is onActivity result. And so this method, the onActivity result, is called when another activity that you launch exits. For example, say you have an app that takes a picture with a camera and you receive the captured photo as a result. This is where that result would go. What we are doing when we are declaring onActivity result in here is we are using the activity that we declared in the manifest file. So if you go to manifest and you see the activity name is facebook.activity. So this is where the login, all of that will be occurring, and then we get the result back in onActivity manager, or back in onActivity result. So to do that, I'm just going to make some space here. I'm going to copy this code and paste it in. And so you can see on this method, you have the request code, the result code, and the data from the intent. And all of this is going to be passed to the callback manager. And the reason you do all this is because it passes the login results to the login manager via the callback manager. So through this here. And so a good example that I want to show you now is, so basically this is all the login functionality. So we can log in and everything. So here I have my emulator and you can see continue with Facebook, this will take you through the login process. However, when I click on it, you can see there's an app not set up and it's in development mode and I don't have permission to access it. I wanted to show you this because I'm logged in into my emulator in a different Facebook account than the one I'm using for Facebook for developers. And so if I want to change this, what I would have to do is I have to go to roles. So I can show you, I can go to roles. And then I have to add me either test users, administrator, or developer so that I can then be used to access this application. However, what I'm going to be doing is I'm just going to log in with my Facebook account that I'm in Facebook for developers with on my emulator. So I'm going to run the application. Then you can see this is how we would log in. And then you just fill in your login details. And you can see what it says is it will receive my gender and friends list. These are the permissions that I set here, user gender and user friends. So just press continue. And so you can see now I'm logged in and you can see I can log out. But of course we haven't done anything. We've logged in, but we can't really do much because we haven't really done anything else. And I'll show you what we've been doing now with the Graph API. And so you may be wondering what was the point of logging in then if nothing happens. And so really the point of logging in is so we can retrieve an access token that has the information of the permissions we set. And this access token allows us to access the Graph API. And the Graph API is the primary way to read and write data to and from Facebook. All Facebook SDKs actually interact with the Graph API in some way. And so to work with the Graph API is I'm going to go in here in the onActivity result. So when we've returned from the Facebook activity, and I'm going to type in, you have to use the Graph Request class. Just name it Graph Request. And what I'm going to set that equal to is new Graph Request dot new me request. And you can see it takes an access token, which we will do access token dot get current access token, and it also takes a graph JSON callback. And so what a new me request is, it's basically when we want to retrieve the user's own profile. So I want to retrieve my own profile information. You have to pass the access token because to use the Graph API, you have to use an access token. And a graph JSON callback is basically the response from the Graph API in the form of a JSON object you can parse and get the data from. And here you can see we have a method called onCompleted. And this method is called when this Graph API request completes. And you can see this response here is also the response from the Graph API that could contain error information or things like that. So for now, I'm just going to leave this. I'm just going to end it with a semicolon. So you can see we've set up our graph request, but we actually haven't executed it or sent it or anything. And so the reason this is because we have set these permissions, for example, but we might not want to retrieve all of them. For example, you might only want to retrieve your name or your profile picture, and you don't actually want your friends list or your gender. And so to set the parameters that you want, you do graph request.setParameters. And you can see it takes a bundle. And a bundle is basically used to pass data between activities. So the other activity being the Facebook activity where we retrieve information from the Graph API. So I'm just going to do bundle equals new bundle. And now I'm going to do bundle.putString. And you can see it takes a key value, a key, and a value. So in a bundle, values are mapped to keys, which are used in the next activity to retrieve these values. And so the Facebook activity will be looking for the key fields. So make sure that you type in fields here and not anything else, because it's going to be looking for this key to give you the values that you desire. And so the values we want are gender, name, ID, let's do first name, and last name. So you should notice how down here, these values are actually different than the permissions we set up here. So it's user gender, but down here it is just gender. You can find these values by going here to developers.facebook.com, docs, Graph API, and user, and you could see these are some of the permissions you can use. So for example, you see we have gender here, whereas in the other permissions, you could see, if you remember, it was user gender. And so now we will add the bundle to our graph request, and then we just have to execute it, and using the method execute async. So execute async means it's executed asynchronously, or basically on a separate thread and in the background. So now let me show you what this JSON object looks like through the logcat. So if I type in log.d and I do demo and object.toString, I'll show you the data we've retrieved and how to parse it. So let me run the application. You can see, let's log in, continue with Facebook. Because we did single sign-in, you can see I just have to press continue instead of signing in again. And now you can see we have login successful, which comes from here, from the callback. And you can also see the JSON object that we have printed out. You can see we have gender, name, ID, first name, and last name. So we don't have user friends because I put it as a permission, but I did not request it from the Graph API. I just requested gender, name, ID, first name, and last name. First name, last name, and ID and name are what come by default. And now there is one last thing that I want to go over before I finish this video, and it's access token tracker. We need an access token tracker because we want to detect when our user's logged out. If the user is logged out, their access token will be null. And so to do this, track the access token, we have a class called access token tracker. And I'll set that equal to a new access token tracker. And you can see it has the method onCurrentAccessTokenChanged. So whenever the access token changes, this method is called automatically. And so when the token is changed, what I want to check for is if it's null, because if the access token is null, then it means the user is logged out. So I'll do if current access token equals null. Then remember to logging in is controlled by the login manager, which is wrapped by the login button. But to log out here, we have to do login manager. You have to get the instance of it for the instance of them logged in, and then just choose logout. And don't forget to add a semicolon here. And now finally, it's also recommended in the documentation that you should always do access token and you should stop tracking in any time you destroy your activity. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press Ctrl O and I'm going to override onDestroy. And so we're going to keep super.onDestroy, but we're also going to do access token dot stop tracking. And so now our app is good to go. The only thing we need to do is, as I showed you in the beginning, we wanted to display the image and we also wanted to display the text. You can see I've already added an image view and a text view that I've titled IV profile pic. I've given them the IDs IV profile pic and TV name. So now I'm just going to declare them up here. Then I'll link them to their IDs. And so what we want to do, when the user is signed in, we want to display their name and their image. And so this should all be done within this onCompleted. So when the object has been returned, we should then use the text view and the image view, and we should set it to what we retrieved from this JSON object. And so within JSON object, basically, once again, it is keys and values. And the key is a string. So you can see we have gender as a string, name as a string. So if we want to obtain the name, what we do is we just do object.getString, and we would do name. So this here will return the name with code. And let's set that equal to the string name. And of course, we have an error that we have to handle, so I'm just going to surround it with a try catch. Next, what we want to retrieve is our ID, because we can use our ID to get our profile picture. So I'm going to do string ID equals object.getString ID, because the ID is this, and you can see you have the ID key right here. So now I'm just going to do text view dot set text name. Now to set the image view, I'm going to be using a third-party tool called Picasso. If I don't use that, I'll have to use bitmaps and separate threads, and that's just kind of a headache. So I'm going to go on over to Google. I'm going to type in Picasso Android. And you can see here, this is the page, square.github.io/Picasso. And all you have to do is just go down here to your implementation, and you have to implement this. And so you can see it's com.squareup.picasso, which is the group ID, Picasso, which is the artifact ID, and then version, insert the latest version. The version can be found here in this link available on GitHub. So scroll down to where you see the implementation right here. We're using Gradle. So I'm going to copy. I'm going to go to my app Gradle file. And you can see I've already installed it, but let me just do it again. Paste that in, and then you will sync. And now that you've synced, go back to the main activity, and you can do Picasso .get .load. You want to load the URI, and this is the URI that is used to load a Facebook profile picture. And so to get a user profile picture, you have to use this URI. So it is https graph.facebook.com from the Graph API, and then the picture, the type can be large, but you can set it to medium, small, and then it takes the user ID here to display your actual profile. So for me, it's ID. And then finally what we have to do is we have to load this image into our image view. So now after this graph request, everything should load and it should work. And then the final thing we have to do is we have to make sure that when we log out, we also want to clear the text view and we want to get rid of the image. So I'm going to do text view.set text to blank. I'm going to do image view.set image resource to 0. And so now our app should run and work perfectly. So you can see I've run the application, continue Facebook to log in, press continue again, and there we are, the name and the profile picture. All right, thank you for watching.